Hi there everybody, Rain Lionheart here, and welcome back to the channel. So in last lecture video, we talked about thematics, theme, and motifs. We talked about what those are, why they are important, why you should use them, how to use them, the different types of motifs that there are, the different types of thematics, and the messaging overall that you want to really give your story its foundation on. What is the basis that you're trying to say? Because all stories have a foundation, and it usually comes from an idea of something, and usually that's some sort of message. So if you haven't watched that video, I will link it down in the description. I can't talk. Take two. So I will link it down in the description for you guys, and you will be able to watch that in its entirety as well. And you can also make sure to follow up on this one if you want to watch them in order. But if this is your first time here and you are watching this and you're like, nah, I don't need to watch this, I can just watch this one instead, then that's fine too, because this will be new for both parties either way. So we're going to be talking about inspiration and aesthetic, mood and atmosphere, right? We're going to be talking about what makes your world appealing and why. What makes ℒ𝔤𝔤𝔤𝔤𝔤 exciting, besides the fact that it's Las Vegas. Even though, by the way, can I just, you know what, I'm going to say it now. Okay, I'm going to say it now. By the way, so Saints Row took Providence, Rhode Island, New York City, and New Jersey. They took the name Stillwater from Stillwater, New Jersey, and then what they did is they melded it all together to create Stillwater. Okay. Saints Row 3, Saints Row the Third, is supposed to be in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Okay, fair enough. Looks a little like maybe like Detroit or like maybe North Pittsburgh, I guess. But ℒ𝔤𝔤𝔤𝔤 is clearly in every single facet Las Vegas, Nevada. Either way, the point is, it is in fact Las Vegas, Nevada. And you know what they claimed it was? You know what they tried to say it was? Oh, it's Albuquerque, New Mexico. Like, what? No. Try again. It's not Albuquerque, New Mexico. Maybe that's where you want it to be, but no. I mean, it's in the Four Corner states, so like you're close, because the Four Corner states in Southwest America, they all border each other. So like, yeah, but it's not New Mexico. That is Las Vegas. I have no idea where they're getting that from, but you know, it is what it is. I mean, I guess like the main city portion is like Paradise, Las Vegas, and like its surrounding neighborhoods, and then like the outskirts is supposed to be like Albuquerque. Anyways, I'm getting distracted. That's not the point. We're going to talk about how you can make your world, and we're going to talk about what you can do to make your world exciting and appealing for people to read, to watch, or to develop in case it's like a video game or something. So that's what we're going to do. I have no idea why they called it. Yeah, like look, it's clearly Las Vegas. Like I don't know. Anyways, whatever. Let's talk about inspiration and aesthetic. Okay. So inspiration and aesthetic is the second element that we use in storytelling. It is the mood and the atmosphere. It is what we use in order to set the scene, to set the mood, to get things right. It's what we use to really kind of set the stage. Think about like a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, right? You have the dungeon master or the game master or manager, depending on how you want to cut it, and they talk about, for example, you see the skyline of New York City. The wind howls as debris flutters across the street. You see rapid cars going in every which way possible. The blur of a busy Tuesday morning. Like, you get the idea that it's New York. So we use the same thing here as writers, but we use something known as inspiration and aesthetic, or more, I'm not going to say more commonly called, but like for your basic understanding, mood and atmosphere. We use mood and atmosphere to tell our story, right? We can say the skyline of New York City shines brightly on a Tuesday morning. Debris starts to flutter through the streets. Rats begin to scramble into the gutters, of maybe like we're at the West End, or maybe we're on the, maybe we're in Southern Manhattan. So like the gutters of Southern Manhattan, a taxi cab drifts around a corner. Like we can say that and like we're getting the idea, but that's not really the best, right? We can do much better. So in order to have your world become not just visually appealing, but thematically appealing, and just occurred to me, I didn't get to talk about thematics in the last lecture. Completely escaped me, so I do apologize for that. But if I go back just to prove that it's there, thematics, and to be honest, I mean, yeah, see, thematics is tricky. So thematics is essentially, it is the gimmicks of the world that make your world what it is. So for example, thematics would be like when you talk about maybe the way people behave in a casino in Las Vegas. Thematics would be like the architecture or the jazz or the maybe it's like the way someone speaks in Rapture. Or when we talk about thematics of Empire Bay for New York, Empire Bay, New York City, in Mafia 2, there's a certain type of way that people walk and they talk and they act, and because it's the 50s, they use certain types of slang. Those are all thematics that allow your world to feel real. I put it in the front of the section, or in the front of the lecture series, because really when you're thinking about a story, you want to think about your motifs and your themes, right? You want to think about your message, and you want to think about what can represent that message and how you can intertwine them together and have them come up periodically, if not often, when necessary, or all the time, if you're like a melodrama, in your work. But really, thematics, because this is when you're thinking of like the ideas of your world and the ideas of your story. So you're thinking about what message you want to say, then you're thinking about what I can use to represent that message, and then you're thinking about how the world acts upon that message, which are the thematics. So I mean, I put it in the front, but really it could also apply to inspiration and aesthetic, or mood and atmosphere. It can apply to this as well, because if you use thematics, again, we'll use Rapture at the bottom left-hand corner there, for example. So Rapture has this... Rapture has, it's 1930s Art Deco with unchecked capitalism, and it's this giant, basically roaring 20s city. So the thematic here, we would want to talk about crystalline chandeliers, neon lights. We want to talk about bubbles that are so reflective you could see your own reflection in the bubbles, who then have a reflection of the reflection in the bubbles, right? We want to talk about how the skyscrapers, no matter how tall they seem, they just never seem to breach the surface of the water. We're talking about the warm glow inside each of the buildings, and it looks so cozy, but upon inside, there's blood everywhere, there's dead bodies, people's limbs are all over the place. There's a Big Daddy drilling someone against a wall. That sounds terrible. Ken Levine, you're hilarious. But that's the point, though, right? Is you want to give your world some kind of thematic. You want to give them a gimmick. You want to give your world something that makes it feel like, hey, we're not just a backdrop. There we go. My mic was a little out of place. We don't want to give the world as a backdrop, but we also want to give the world some life. We want to give the world some aesthetic. We want to give the world, and we want to make it feel like it's not just a backdrop, it's not just a scene, but it's a place that actually feels like something is living here. When we look at Hogwarts, and a great example is Hogwarts Legacy, and again, I write for video games, so I'm going to be using a lot of video games, but I wouldn't mind writing for novella or television mention as well. When we look at video games and Hogwarts Legacy or Harry Potter, for example, so when we look at Hogwarts, it does not feel like just a backdrop. I mean, I understand from a game design standpoint and from a gameplay perspective, they made sure not to have that. But when you look at ℒ𝔬𝔯𝔯𝔬𝔤 and Saints Row, the worst thing that they could have done with this game was make ℒ𝔬𝔯𝔯𝔬𝔤 a movie set cookie cutter backdrop with you can't do anything in the city. It's just there to fill up an environment and just to run around and just to look at, and it looks nice. That was the worst thing that they could do. Don't get me wrong, the graphics are actually really good. At least on the Xbox and Xbox Series X. At least on the Xbox One X and the Series X. So I can't speak for anything else. But the graphics aren't even that bad. The engine is pretty good. I only ran into maybe like 3 glitches in my entire playthrough of the game. I get really lucky with that. Like, the same thing with like Sonic 06. If you didn't have a broken copy, like I did, my copy worked great. Oh, that game was marvelous! But that's not the point. The point here is they could have done anything with ℒ𝔬𝔯𝔯𝔬𝔤, and they made it a movie. They made it a movie backdrop. They made it a movie prop. They made it a scene. What they did is they made it a movie background, and that's cool. But when the player is actually running around and trying to explore the environment, I mean, everything is just a museum piece. And I get that that's kind of really what, like, the Four Corner States, you know, I get that's what Arizona's, I get that's what New Mexico, Nevada, I get, like, in that area, there's a lot of museum pieces, and there's a lot of public parks, and there's a lot of national parks, and there's a lot of wildlife preservation stuff out there. And there's a lot of hiking trails, I get it. But they made such a bad job making it a backdrop. It feels like you should never have done that. I say this because when you write your worlds and you write your stories, I want to look, I want to see, I want to read, I want to play, I want to watch and witness the character or characters not just interact with the world, but the world interact with the character. I want to see how the world responds to what a character does. And the fact of the matter is, a great way to do that when you're creating your worlds, when you're writing your stories, when you're making a world. So, for example, let's say that this world is, and let me go to the next slide here for just a moment here. When you go and write your worlds and you write your stories and you're writing the settings that these marvelous adventures and these novellas take place in, your job is to make sure that your world must be living and breathing for it to be believable. Having a movie backdrop like ℒ𝔬𝔯𝔯𝔬𝔤 was absolutely awful. But if you played Mafia 2, for example, or Bioshock Infinite, Bioshock 2, any of 1, 2, and 3, those games, Rapture did not just feel like it was a set piece. You could really go almost anywhere you wanted. When I played Bioshock Infinite, I was afraid what would happen if I didn't, like, stay on the main course, but I was like, I want to see what else is around me, and I know I can get to it because the game will let me. And, of course, there's a lot of backtracking involved in that game, so, you know, which I think is stupid, but the fact that they allow you to go pretty much in anywhere that you want, you know, that was a big deal. Bioshock 1, that was also a big deal. The original Bioshock, there was a lot of places you could go. They didn't, I mean, of course you could follow the main narrative and they make you go from district to district, but you can really kind of go wherever you want. And there was no door that was kind of unopenable. There wasn't really any secret passages that could not be found. And that's a good thing because I want to see all that the world has to offer. When you're writing a world, when you're writing a setting, when you're writing this I don't even want to say a narrative, but when you look at The Witcher, for example, The Witcher feels extremely real and super lived in, and that's because the way The Witcher was written took into account that the main character Geralt and the rest of his cohorts, they're not just like, it's not just them running around an open field and just like whatever happens. It's not like that. It's the same thing with Final Fantasy 15. In both The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt and Final Fantasy 15, they interact with the world, and everything about it has its own lore, and everything about it has its own reasoning and logic, and everything about it has its own status, which then allows Geralt or Noctis or Ignis or Yennefer or whoever to go and interact with their worlds, respectively. So when you write your world, you should think about, okay, what kind of world is this? If this is a 1700s historical fiction, well, I want to talk about the things that I want to talk about what life was like in the 1700s. And then what's going to happen is I'm going to make things, I'm going to write things that would happen. So, for example, a horse kicks over a cart, for whatever reason. The horse goes wild and it kicks over a cart. Okay. So then the cart goes crashing, and the cart, goes and crashes into maybe into a window of a shop or something. So I would want to talk about what it was like to what it was like to deal with that as someone in the 1700s. That was at least 3 weeks worth of work right there. And so you want to write your worlds like they're not just settings or props or movie drop backgrounds. You really want to write your worlds like they matter. So in my example of Emerald Gardens here, when I talk about kind of the main kingdom I focus on, Celestia ad Luna, it was inspired by the Disney castle, who was then inspired from a German castle, European fairy tales, etc. So just by the picture alone, you can kind of get what this world may look like. Now, in writing, which I'll show in just a few here, but in writing, I would want to give it that life and give it that description that really kind of shows, hey, this isn't just a backdrop, there's more to this world. And there's tons of other details you can do. A good example, I have a fictional motorcycle outlaw gang by the name of Extinction. They all have dinosaur powers, which I thought was really cool. So they all have dinosaur powers. And whenever they cause chaos and whenever they create a problem, because bikers are always getting into fights and gunfights and brawls and things like that. So, for example, they take out a bridge, and because they have dinosaur powers, so they could stomp or punch or slam something into a bridge, and the bridge collapses. And it's this big highway bridge, right? It's this huge bridge. Well, most creative writers would say, well, after 2 months, the bridge was repaired, and then the gang was able to cross the bridge. Or after 2 months of hiding, the bridge was finally complete, and then the gang members were able to come out of hiding, and they were able to cross the bridge again. Don't do that. Don't ever do that. Don't do that. Please don't. I'll tell you why. Because what you did was you made it obsolete the minute it got interesting. A bridge just got taken out. Okay, it's just a bridge, so what? Okay, well, here's the thing. So if you have this group of motorcycle outlaws that have dinosaur powers, and they got in this fight, and they smashed this bridge, this highway bridge, and it just completely destroys, a good maybe 11 mile radius, we'll say. I mean, that's pretty far, but we'll say it's a really big bridge or a really long stretch of bridge. Okay. Or maybe in the neighboring area, there's the bridge, it's on top of an overlook of a section of the city, and then within 11 miles of that bridge, everything just got destroyed. Most writers would sit there and be like, well, they went into hiding for 2 months, and then the bridge was, repaired, and then they went, and then they were able to cross the bridge again, and this time they made sure not to do it. That's bad. What you want to say is you want to have your characters say, well, shit, now we can't cross this bridge, and we're going to have to go through another route to get to where we want to go. And then you can set them up for something that happens. So just off the top of my head, we say the bridge collapses. They, and after the fight, they all get on their motorcycles and they take the fuck off. They take off, right? And they all go back to the clubhouse, and then we'll say a few days later, or maybe like the day after, they pop on the news and they're talking about how within 11 miles, the whole section of the city is shut down for construction. It's going to take them, we'll say, 4 months to rebuild the bridge, almost half a year. It's going to take them that much time. Have your characters react to that accordingly. Maybe the hothead, thinks like, oh, whatever, fuck them. They could just do whatever they want. And, it's just a bridge, who cares? And then maybe someone who's a little more reserved is like, well, this causes a problem. And then someone who's a little more, impartial says, did we really have to, do all that? I mean, we're kind of alerting ourselves here. We don't want anyone to know what's going on with us. Have your characters react to the world and have your world react to the characters. So they can't cross this bridge. So then maybe one of the crew says, "Oh, well, since we can't go this way, you know what we should do? There's a shuttle, and it goes from, I don't know, Riverton to, we'll say, Brick Station. I don't know. I'm just making stuff off the top of my head here. So what we do is we'll take the train shuttle from Riverton to Bricktown or wherever, and then we'll go through this tunnel. We'll have to walk it, but we'll go through this sewer tunnel to get to the other side." What you just did there is you allowed for the adventure to continue. You allowed not just for the adventure to continue, but you added some realism. You made characters realize that their actions have consequences. That the story is not just A plus B equals C. In school, what they teach you is stories have a beginning, they have the rising action, and then it leads to the climax, and then it has a resolution, which is the downward, it's kind of like a bell curve. But that's not how real stories are written. I mean, maybe on a base framework. Ken Levine says that in screenwriting, there's really 3 acts. You got your beginning, you have your middle, and then the finale. And the middle is where the plot and the climax are, and then you have, your finale. But I would also like to wage the idea that you can have many acts that don't necessarily lead to the finale right away, or you can have many acts that haven't even gotten to the middle yet. And we see that a lot more nowadays. But I mean, yes, in screenwriting there are 3 acts, act 1, 2, and 3, beginning, middle, and end. But that's because of how Shakespeare wrote his plays, and that's how we kind of modeled it off of. But really, you could have act 1, which is a prequel. You can have act 2, which is the beginning. You could have Act 2, but from a different perspective that does, that's another character. Then you could have Act 3, and it's back to the main focus and main crew and main cast and main perspective. Then you could have Act 4 that does this, that, and the other, and you could just keep going on like that until the final act, because really there's no limit on what you can and can't do. But that's not the point here. The point is, if these characters reacted to the fact that there is a bridge that got destroyed, and they say, well, now we have to take this sewer tunnel to get to where we want to go, you continued the adventure. You continued it. You allowed them to now go to a new area that's never been discussed before in the story, and now the audience says, ooh, what's going to happen here? What's going to happen? And then they're going to continue to follow you through that, and then you can set them up for whatever you want. So if my words are if my words were anything to you, it's when you write your world and you write your characters interacting with your world, write it as a journey, not as a story. I don't know if that makes sense, but stories are like A, B, C, beginning, middle, end. A journey is, here's where we start, anything can happen in the middle, and eventually it all ties up in the end. So write it like that. Oh, whoops, I'm sorry. Oh, we'll talk about how to capture that in writing in a second. But again, so for my work, Emerald Gardens, I talk about ℑ𝔤𝔤𝔤𝔤𝔤𝔤𝔤𝔤, and I talk about what that's inspired by. And then we look at ℏ𝔫𝔫𝔫𝔫 Kingdom. It was inspired by the charming Christmas scenes of the old Victorian England era in the 1800s and 1900s Victorian America during the winterscapes and the Christmas scenes. If we look at, this is a fun word, ℏ𝔤𝔤𝔤𝔤𝔤𝔤𝔤𝔤, also known as the Great Regime. So if we look at ℏ𝔏𝔤𝔤𝔤𝔤𝔤𝔤𝔤𝔤𝔤, Okay, it was inspired not only by German words and historical WW2 culture, but also the 1600s and the Middle Ages. Of course, ℑ𝔢𝔢𝔯𝔢 ad ℑ𝐼𝐿um from Kingdom Hearts 3, which, by the way, ℑ𝔢𝔢𝔯𝔢𝔢 ad ℑ𝐼𝐿um is Latin for stairway to heaven. So when we look at the Verdant Archipelago, or Verdant, depending on your pronunciation, I say Verdant, but anyways. So when we look at the Verdant Archipelago, inspired by the Southwest Pacific Islands and tropical environments. So now that you have your foundation, how do we capture this in writing? So when we look at the Verdant Archipelago, for example, or Verdant, when we look at this, I highlighted a few key elements here, but we're going to read the whole thing, and then I'm going to show you what's important and why. To the east lies the Verdant Archipelago, a lush tropical paradise with dense jungles, towering palm trees, vibrant coral reefs, exotic creatures of life, strange animalia, and breathtaking waterfalls. Cliffs that soar among the clouds, and lake beds that span for miles. The leaves are lush and heavy, with all sorts of colors the eyes can see and what has never been seen. The birds are 3 times the size of that of a chicken, and the fish are as long as 4 fishing rods extended together. Shipwrecks are often found here, and at times pirates sail the 12 oceans that stop here for debauchery and sexual pleasure. Oftentimes, treasure is buried here, though it is not uncommon for treasure to be traded here as well. Exotic fruits and even more exotic, strange-looking herbs grow from these very heavy beachfronts that this tropical environment holds. Excuse me. Its soft and squishy fruits to its hard shell nuts and sweet fruits can be accompanied, but the herbs that make the tangy spices are the perfect salty or chewy wrap to go around fruit or meat. Though some of the fruit and herbs are poisonous if not handled properly, and oftentimes becomes the #1 pirate killer, though it can be used and has been used in a few assassinations before to create upheaval of royal families and ruling monarchs. Fishing is a common occurrence here. The fish are bountiful and plentiful. Some are 23 feet long. The longest recorded fish that was caught the longest fish that was caught was by a merchant, ℏ𝔢𝔢𝔯𝔢𝔢𝔢. ℏ𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢. I like that name. ℏ𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢. There you go, ℏ𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢, who had caught himself a 22.3 foot white stripe younger tail greatfish. The diverse array of fish and other types of aquatic and oceanic game make for tasty dishes. Most of the games are cooked in restaurants and taverns. If they come from the archipelago, are quite pricey. This paradise has been explored many times, yet explorers have only estimated that they have uncovered only less than a coin-sized radius when put on the map. So, now we have a very heavy visual idea of what this region of the world in Emerald Gardens looks like. But let's focus on what's highlighted here. I talk about how the cliffs soar among the clouds, how the lake beds span for miles. I talk about how the eyes can see and what has never been seen when it comes to colors, right? So that tells the audience there could be some really crazy color types, like a yellowy, greeny, blurple yellow mix, for example, or maybe a lime colored, if you took a lime and violet and you put it together and you kind of got like the in-between color, maybe something like that. So it gives you kind of an imagination of like, well, there are different colors that I've never seen before. Or maybe there's like a red that looks like a salmon, but then when moved in a certain way, it turns to like almost like kind of like a dark purple. You can use your creativity, and it gives room for the audience to make their own interpretation, which is good. However, the reason why I prefer visual media and visual mediums is because there's less room for interpretation and you get to see exactly what the creator had in mind. But of course, when you're writing, you want to give them at least 90% of what you're talking about up front, but give them at least 10% to draw their own conclusions because A, they need to, B, that's what makes good setups, and last, C, is because people are going to do it anyway. If I read a passage, you are going to interpret it differently, maybe similarly to somebody else, but ultimately you guys might have a different version that you're thinking of in your mind. And that happens because the written word is interpreted by different people different ways. Anyways, So I talk about how the birds are 3 times the size of that of a chicken. Again, you think of a chicken, you magnify that by 3 times, right? And then you think of the fish and how they're long as 4 fishing rods that are extended together. I talk about how the fruits are soft and squishy, almost like a soggy or a very, very wet tomato, right? Or trying to think of a really squishy fruit, like a passion fruit. If you ever held a passion fruit or a really soaking wet dragon fruit, if you ever have, let me know in the comments. But also, you'll know that it's kind of like, almost like holding it's almost like membrane. It's very squishy. So, it's this soft and squishy fruit. I talk about how the herbs that are accompanied by, these fruits, they add the tangy spices or the perfect salty and chewy wrap that goes around fruit and meat that you pop into your mouth. So, I also talk about how some of these herbs are extremely poisonous and they've been used in assassinations to create upheaval in royal families and royal monarchs. This allows you as the author, or in this case me as the author, to not just... I have a lot of room to play. I have a lot of room to play around. I have a lot of room to go and decide, what's been used, how it's been used, where it's been used. I give the audience some clues. Hey, there's more to what I'm telling you than meets the eye. And you need to be able to do that yourself when it comes to writing this world. So that this way, I ask you 101 questions, and now you can give me 101 answers. Or at least you can start thinking about those answers. I talk about how the longest recorded fish was caught by a merchant, and then of course I give the merchant's names, ℏ𝔢𝔦𝔤𝔢𝔢𝔤𝔢𝔤𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔢 a white striped younger tail, and now you want to know what that looks like. Now you want to know where that came from. And this is what I'm talking about when I say your worlds have to be living and breathing. You have to make it to where as if this world has always existed and there was never a time in history where it did not. Or you have to create a world in which someone says, well, now I want to learn more. And of course, lastly, I talk about how on a map, it's really only a coin size. So think of like a quarter, like 25 cents. If you put that on a map, that's how much they've explored. So the archipelago could be massive. So again, this gives me a lot of room to do a lot, and it gives me even more room to answer questions that the audience may have. But what about ℑ𝔤𝔤𝔯𝔯𝔤𝔤 ad luna? So, when we look at ℑ𝔤𝔤𝔯𝔯𝔯𝔤 ad luna, I'm just going to highlight some of the things here. I talk about a Tudor-style clock tower. I talk about I use the word a tapestry, right? I say intertwined with Tudor-style structures. Rows of Tudor houses, shops, apartments, and lofts are interspersed among the grand facades of the Gothic and Renaissance buildings, right? I talk about ad luna's color palette, adorned with pastel shades. I talk about how there's a deeper complexity beneath the surface and how it reflects the tumultuous times that Galahheim has faced, meaning that the architecture of ℑ𝔤𝔤𝔯𝔯𝔯𝔤 ad luna was influenced by events of the past, which is how things happen in the real world. So now you have some connection to this world, and you can kind of understand it, and you say, hey, I'm familiar with some of the things going on here. And then, of course, I talk about how there's in the form of dark steel grays, onyx blacks, and rich brooding shades of red. The interplay of light and dark reflects the underlying conflicts that echo across the shattered continent. So now, when we look at some of these, you can look at the image, and you can kind of already assume, without even me having to tell you, just with what I described here and the image, I shouldn't have to tell you, you probably immediately thought fairy tale. Like, not the anime, but I mean, you probably thought, like, oh, it's a fairy tale-like setting. Like, oh, there's a pearly white castle, you know, it has these little these blue shingled conical rooftops, and it has, you know, golden accents, and, you know, it has these red curtains. Everything is very Cinderella-like, and that's what ℑ𝔤𝔤𝔯𝔯𝔯𝔤 ad luna is. It's a very fairy tale-esque place, or that's how it's supposed to look. So anyways, ℑ𝔤𝔤𝔯𝔯𝔯𝔤𝔤 ad luna, colloquially called ℑ𝔤𝔤𝔤𝔤𝔤, stands as a magnificent kingdom that embodies the fusion of architectural styles from different eras. It is the largest, most expansive, powerful, and economically wealthy kingdom in all of ℏ𝔤𝐻𝑖m. It stands solid dead center of Serenity Savannah. Its military is unwavering and is yet to see defeat. The heart of ℏ𝔤𝔤𝔤𝔤 boasts a splendid Tudor-style clock tower that majestically presides over the city, providing a panoramic view of the entire urban expanse. Though it ranks just below ℑ𝔤𝔤𝔤𝔤𝔤 in height, the clock tower stands as a symbol of ℏ𝔤𝔤�8's historical significance and its enduring connection with time and destiny. Right? Again, going back to that motif of destiny and fate, about what it means to have a legacy and a calling, and these are the things I talk about in Emerald Gardens. So, the cityscape of ℏ𝔤𝔤𝔤𝔤 is a tapestry of Gothic and Renaissance influences. You're already getting an idea of what it looks like. And then, of course, I talk about how it's intertwined with Tudor-style structures. Rows of Tudor houses, shops, apartments, and lofts are interspersed with grand facades of the Gothic and Renaissance buildings. These constructions show a remarkable diversity of oh my god, architectural motifs. I don't know why I paused there. I'm going crazy. Offering an architectural spectacle that the eye to behold. ℏ𝔤𝔤�8's color palette is an ode to both vibrancy and depth. The Gothic and Renaissance-style buildings are adorned with pastel shades, like serene blues, bright whites, golden yellows, prestige reds, soft greens, and understated grays. These hues invoke a sense of grandeur, radiating a smoothing and inviting ambiance, or ambience, depending on your pronunciation. Yet beneath the surface of these resplendent colors lies a deeper complexity, reflecting the tumultuous times that ℏ𝔤𝐻𝔄𝔬𝔤 has faced. For every pastel hue, there exists a counterpart in the form of a dark steel gray, onyx, blacks, and rich brooding shades of red. The interplay of light and dark reflects the underlying conflicts that echo across the shattered continent. At the core of ℏ𝔤𝔤�8's allure, it's all of its profound history, which stretches back countless millennia. It all began with the illustrious Fireheart dynasty, an era that left an incredible mark on the kingdom and its people. The Fireheart dynasty is a storied chapter in the history of ℏ𝔤𝔤�8 and ℏ𝔤𝐻𝐼m, marked by its founding, reign, and eventual fall. No pun intended, by the way. But that's the point. So now you can kind of see that it's this grandiose fairy tale-like kingdom. And that's what I want to... And that's the image that I want to give off. That's what I want to say. That's what I want to give the audience. Because when then I talk about ℏ𝔤𝔤𝔤𝔤𝔤, which it's spelled goth-a-chow, but it's ℏ𝔤𝔤𝔤𝔤 the way that's said. When I talk about ℏ𝔤𝔤𝔤𝔤, everything is like heavy medieval times. Everything is Norman this, Gothic that. Everything is very... what's the word I want to use? Everything is very like Middle Ages and Dark Ages, and everything is like heavy Norman influence, etc. So it creates kind of this contrast with the very magical and mystical, almost Disneyland like kingdom that ℏ𝔤𝔤�8 is it kind of mimics. So before we get into this, I just want to make sure. Yes. So, when we talk about how to capture in writing, right? We talk about these descriptive words, but don't be afraid to really emphasize the reasoning as to why something is. And of course, we'll talk about that when we get to explanation versus justification. We'll explain more on that. But for now, what you need to know is when you take an idea and you say, well, it looks like this, and it has these things in it, and I'm being vague because you can put whatever you want. Like, so if you're writing a military story, for example, well, the base is shaped like a giant... I don't know. It's shaped like a giant hexagon in the middle of the desert, and there's like 20 of them scattered around, and they look like little acne dots from the top-down view, for example. However you want to describe it. Don't be afraid to really dive into the description as to why those things are. So when I talk about ℏ𝔤𝔤𝔤𝔤𝔤, I talk about how it's enveloped by the enchanting embrace of the Northeast region, enveloped by the enchanting embrace of the Northeast region lies ℒ𝔬𝔤𝔞𝔯𝔞𝔠𝔕. So right off the bat, I talk about how in this area, something is encapsulated. And then that gives you the idea of like Florida, for example, or like something or like Hawaii, something that's surrounded by something. Okay, well, what is it? Well, you can tell it's water. So, and then we talk about how this majestic kingdom, which commands domination over the ℍ𝔢𝔢𝔯𝔢𝔠 Isles, sprawls across a captivating seascape encompassing a collection of islands, right? So now, like I said, think of Hawaii when I use the word enveloped. So it's encompassed, it's surrounded, it's cradled, it's held by. These are all words that we use so that and I guess it's wordsmithing, but we use these so that we can describe an environment that's kind of surrounded by something or tucked away or put against something in kind of this crescent moon-like shape. And you know what else is like that? Islands. And guess what? It's an island. The ℍ𝔢𝔢𝔯𝔢𝔢 Isles. They're islands, right? So when you write your worlds, you want to really not just drive home the point of what they are, but literally write out what they are. The audience will not know unless you legitimately tell them this is what it is. Because if I just said in the enchanting region of the northeast of Galahheim lies ℒ𝔬𝔤𝔞𝔯𝔢𝔞𝔠𝔱𝔢𝔯, also renowned as the Great Regime. This majestic kingdom commands dominion. It sprawls across a captivating seascape. This, that, and the other. The audience is going to think, oh, so it's this coastal kingdom, but it's not. It's not. It's a kingdom of islands. They're all islands. And so you have to write words like enveloped, majestic, commands, ℍ𝔢𝔢𝔯𝔢𝔢 Isles, the islands, leisurely reach of a riverboat voyage, opulent, right? These are words like the opulent of the Oceania Palace. These are things that give you an idea of what this world is like. As the author, it's my duty to explain to you what this thing is and give you at least some information. As the audience, they can interpret it as they want, but like I said before, it is your job as the author to tell them and to give them kind of the picture. You are the painter of the world. It is your job to tell them this is what ℒ𝔬𝔤𝔞𝔯𝔢𝔢𝔢𝔤 looks like. It's enveloped by the enchanting embrace of the Northeast region. Okay, well, what does that look like? In the next line, we say, this majestic kingdom which commands dominion over the ℍ𝔢𝔢𝔯𝔢𝔢 Isles. It sprawls across the captivating sea landscape, or the seascape, encompassing a collection of islands. Now we can kind of we envision Hawaii. We envision, like these islands that are almost cradled by sea, and that's what we want. We want to give that image. Anyways, we talk about how the ruling authority is personified by the sovereign, who is the ruler, and reigns from the opulent Oceania Palace, nestled amid this aquatic archipelago, where riverboat passages serve as the lifeblood of the regime's bustling isles. So we know that people get from point A to point B on riverboats. And then we talk about island hopping, a cherished pastime and convenience of travel among the regime's citizenry. It unfolds as vibrant tapestry of daily life, right? Riverboats and their decks teeming with passengers engaged in various pursuits glide serenely through the tranquil waters. Like you're really thinking of what is it? Galding Key from Final Fantasy 15. Think of Galding Key. Think of Bora Bora. Think of Hawaii. Think of any of these luxury places. That is this. And and that's how we capture it in writing. We use descriptions that match not just the aesthetic, and not just the world, but the literal environment of the world that we're trying to create. You cannot write a good world if you do not write the environment. And that sounds super basic, but you would be surprised as to how many aspiring creative writers and how many authors do not tell me anything about the world, about the laws, about the politics, about the geography, about the terrain, about anything, when these are super important. As someone who is an active member of like D&D and the written roleplay community, there are 1,000,001 questions I have about somebody's world, because there might be 101 ways I might want to like do something or take an action, and I always have to ask, what is X, Y, and Z like? Is there water around? Does this happen? Is this the way it works? What about when the police show up or whatever? Maybe like, does the king have to ask a council for permission to go to war or something like that? It's just like how the president does. Like he has to ask Congress. So these are things that I ask for because I need to know the type of environment so I can write accordingly. Because if you give me basic information and then I just say a bunch of things that like you did not envision in your world, that's not on me. That's on you. That's not on me. That you didn't give me any information. If for example, I'm doing this one D&D, and well, if it ever gets off the ground, if the game manager decides to do anything, or the dungeon master decides to do anything, but anyways, in this one D&D, what is supposed to happen is we're all supposed to like start at this place. Okay. And as the course of the story goes on, we're supposed to get weapons and armor and upgrade, etc. Okay, fine. Well, I'm going to want to talk about diving into dirt, or like, splashing into the water, or like peeking up over a barrel and firing a shot or something like that. Or if I'm playing a rogue, for example, I might talk about wanting to climb up a wall or whatever. Well, what's the textures of the wall? Because if the texture of the wall is wood, I'm going to be a little wary of if I should climb up the wall or not, because if you know anything about wood and drywall, while wood is a great material, it creaks like a motherfucker. Like, it creaks like hell. For those of you who have whose houses are made out of legit wood, clapboard, and you got the wooden floors, in the wooden stairs, it creaks like hell. It creaks. But if it was made out of something else, perhaps I would be a little less cautious. I mean, of course, I'd still be cautious because I'm a rogue, I'm a thief, but that's not the point. The point is, tell me about the environment of the world, because it makes it much more immersive, and then that immersion will take the audience to the place you want to go. You create the vehicle that the audience goes in. We have a phrase called "in the pocket." So, creative writers, we have a thing called "in the pocket." And when the reader or the player or the viewer is in the pocket, that means you got them in the vehicle for a suspended state of disbelief. And that essentially means that they kind of forget if something is real or not. Think of like a really good Minecraft ARG or a really good horror ARG that you've watched. Like with the Minecraft horror ARGs, which are amazing, it's kind of hard to tell, like, is this real or is this fake? Like, obviously I know, like, it's fake, but they lose me in just the elaborate storytelling that I forget if it's real or not. And that is what you want to do. You want to create the vehicle for the audience to get in, and you want to let them kind of see the world here. So... excuse me. So that's what you want to do. So before we get into that, yes, I can do that. I want to make sure. So when you write your story, okay, when you're writing out the world and when you're writing out the way things work, and you're talking to me about the environment, and you're talking to me about the way that the systems are and how things, whether it's magic or military or law and order or the way that food is prepared. A good example is in one of my other works, the Moonlight Chronicles. There's something known as the Hydro Flask, and the Hydro Flask is basically, I think it's a Hydro Flask or a hydroscope, and essentially what it is that it is a hourglass. Like, think of a really fat hourglass, a really big, tall hourglass. The thing with sand that tells time and you flip it, every hour. So what they have in this town of Silver, I think it's called Silver Pines or Silver Isle, something like that. And essentially, they don't have fresh water. They have seawater. So what they have to do is they have to go collect their water, and then what they do is they bring it back to their house, and then they put it into this hydro flask, or this hydrosphere, or hydroscope. And essentially what it is it's this hourglass, and there's a filter where the two tiers of the glass meet. So like those two needle points where the sand is meant to filter from the top of the hourglass to the bottom. There's a filter in there. And then there's a little crank on like the left or right hand side. I think it's the right hand side. And what you do is you have to crank the hourglass over and over and over and over again, because what it does is it filters out the salt from the seawater so that it becomes drinkable. But of course, like realistically, like you would have to boil it and like a bunch of other things because of the bacteria. But that's not the point. The point is that if I'm telling you about how you got to crank it, this, that, and the other, I have to explain to you, well, why is that? Why does it matter? Who invented it? This, that, and the other. Why does it matter? Because if you're going to mention things to the audience, they're going to want to know about it. Audiences that don't ask questions are a dumb audience. Like, that's just how it is. There's no if, ands, or buts. Like, with Final Fantasy 15, I want to know so many things, but because of the way the development went, I'll never get answers, and plus there's a bunch of external media, which I thought was nonsense, but we're not going to get into that. The point here is this. When you're writing for impact, your ability to communicate effectively will leave a lasting impact on your audience. Do not be afraid to push boundaries to what may or may not exist in your world. When creating an aesthetic, we must put the world into a factual state. For example, you must write your world as if it has existed since you were in first grade. That's how the world should be seen. That there could never not be this world. So when picking vibes and aesthetics, make sure that your world fits not just visually, but sounds cohesive, like the examples that I gave you just now prior. And sometimes having things all over the place is in fact cohesive. If you look at like Hogwarts, there's 1,000,001 things that go on. None of it makes sense, but all of it makes sense because it's the wizarding world, because it's Hogwarts, and there's magic, and there's different tiers of magic, and then there's this, that, and the other. So you can have 1,000,001 things if you want, but just make sure that they all, even if it's not cohesive, it follows the same kind of pathway and trajectory. Anyways. Effectively communicating involves not only delivering a message, but also resonating with experiences, values, and emotions of those who are listening. If you want readers to be engaged, you must under no circumstances give them any room to question whether it just works. I mean, think of Todd Howard, right? It just works. It works because you say it does. Now, that doesn't mean that you can just say, oh, well, if you eat a penguin feather, maybe like you shot and killed a penguin, like you like took a feather and you ate it, now you achieve invincibility. Okay, cool. Without any other explanation, I think it's fucking whack, but cool. I want to know more about it now. And that's kind of the thing. Oh my god. I had really spicy apple cider. Like, this thing was like super spiced. I don't know what the fuck. Yeah, they put like a lot of cinnamon in that. I have no idea why. Anyways, so yeah, they put a lot of cinnamon in there. It's great stuff, but Jesus, that's a lot. So you want to make sure that when you write your world, you say it works because I say it does, but you have to tell me why you say it does. Tell me, what is it about the penguin feather that gives you invincibility, and that's why they're these coveted animals that if they get killed, it's a really big deal. What about it? Like, of course, I'm making it up as I go, but that's... that's the kind of the rule that you have to follow is if you say it works, okay, tell me why. So a real example, a personal story, was I got questioned on the birth of my character, Warwick Leon Riverbell. Long story short, without getting too much into the detail, essentially the way that the birth process works for the Luminari, who are the elf race. That, by the way, that's Sir Ghaldwyn, who is the general for Celestia ad Luna's ground military, because they're primarily a navy, but they do have an excellence in ground units as well. 𝔑𝔤𝔰𝔦𝔤𝔫 is in the background there. That being said, when you write something, you need to explain it. So the way it works for the Luminaries is nobody is allowed to witness the birth of nobility, or like royalty rather. No one is allowed to witness the birth of royalty except for the husband, the mother, and usually an oracle or a what is it called? Hold on, do I have it in here? Yes. Okay. So what was it called? No one else, no guards, no castles, no staff, everybody's, oh my god. Hold on, where is it? Midwives, physicians, where am I? Oracle, but then there is an epident. There it was, a hierophant. There it is, hierophant. So we'll get back to that in a second. So hierophant. So the way it works is the mother, the father, an oracle, or a hierophant are the only ones allowed in the birth, because they say that the place where all royalty is born, and only midwives, physicians, and the royal family, and upon approval from the mother, close friends, and family inside. No one else, no guards, no castle staff until after birth, no bodyguards, no close relatives or distant ones for that matter, no religious figures, and the only ones that are religious figures are the hierophant and the oracle. They're allowed to be there. So essentially, it's this very, very closed event that no one, like, not everybody just gets to witness it. And she's giving birth, and like as she's giving birth, there's like this stained glass like depiction of a god looking down on her as she's looking up at him as she's giving birth. And the point of it all is essentially, the reason that the Luminari do this is because they believe that royalty, when born, is so sacred that you're essentially witnessing, like, the how do I say, not like the denomination, because that's degrading, but you're witnessing like the presence of you're witnessing, religiously speaking, you are witnessing a god give the mother the strength to push out a child who is then anointed to have the powers of a god, because they are associated with royalty, who are like divinely intertwined with said god. So therefore, only a certain like few people are allowed to witness this, because it's like your god is your midwife, pretty much. That's why. Like that's pretty much why. Anyways, when I told somebody this, they completely exploded on me. They blew up on me, and they started criticizing 1,000,001 questions. They start criticizing 1,000,001 things. Then they start asking 1,000,001 questions. And then what they did is they were like, well, I find it fucking stupid that no one else is allowed, and I feel it really odd that like no one else is just there. Why is it can only be the Okay, I'll tell you why. Because I said so. That's it. Because I said so. End of discussion. Because I said so. There. Because I said it. Are you ready? I said so. That's why. That's why. Like Quentin Tarantino, when he was asked on the news, why does your movies have to be so violent? Because it's fun, Linda. Because it's fun, Karen. That's why. Because it's badass to see a chick with a katana run around, slice people up. That's why. It is the same thing here. Why is the mother nearly alone giving birth? Because that's the way the world works. And that's what makes it interesting. Because that doesn't happen in real life. Have you ever been in a room when someone is giving birth? There's like 10 people in that room. There's the midwife, there's the secondary midwife, there's the husband or boyfriend, there's usually friends and family, so God knows how many that is. And then there's also like the gynecologist, and there's like a surgeon on standby if necessary. There's a lot of people in that room all crowd around this one woman trying to push out like a fucking kid. So that's why it's different. Because in this one, it's such a divine event that only certain people that of the mother's approval, aside from like the oracle and the hierophant, are allowed, of course like the king as well, are allowed to be in. And by the way, if you have siblings, your brother or your sister, or brothers or sisters, might want to witness your birth. Imagine your mother said, no, you can't see this. That's fucked up. But that's something that could happen. So there's a lot of things that go on in here. So let's talk about that in more detail. So when we talk, and again, I don't know why this is fucking ℏ𝔤𝔞𝔯𝔞𝔠𝔱𝔢. It should have been ℏ𝔤𝔤𝔞𝔯𝔞𝔠𝔱𝔢. I suppose for some reason I must have, I don't know how I messed that up. But anyways, he was born in ℏ𝔤𝔤𝔞𝔯𝔞𝔠𝔱𝔢, or yes, ℏ𝔤𝔤𝔞𝔯𝔞𝔠𝔱𝔢, with in the ethereal sanctum, a place where all royalty is born. Only midwives, physicians, the royal family, and upon approval of the mother, close friends are allowed inside. No one else. No guards, no castle staff until after birth, no bodyguards, no close relatives or distant ones for that matter. Again, until said approval of the mother. No religious figures. Only those who are within the circle of the throne may be allowed inside. To the religious group, they believe that they are unworthy to see the birth of the next emperor or empress. They believe anyone below them, such as castle staff guards of any kind, and the citizens of ℏ𝔤𝔞𝔯𝔞𝔠𝔱𝔢 are as well, meaning that they are below the royalty, like they shouldn't see that at all. The only remote religious figure in the room is one of two people. The hierophant. The title hierophant is often used for a religious leader who interprets sacred mysteries or rituals, right? Like birth, even though it's not really, a sacred mystery, but still. Or the oracle, the spiritual leader of the castle, known for their prophetic abilities and guidance. These two, usually an oracle, watch as the birth commences and channel the spirit energy called ℒ𝔢𝔞𝔯𝔢𝔠, which is a more religious than actual, it's more of a religious thought than actual magic. It's essentially taking the power of clandestine, which is this god, right, binding it to the child who is being born. It's a sacred ritual that essentially defines without question that this child is not only the new empress or emperor, but also has the power of a god within them. Which is why not everybody can just come in and say, hey, can I see what's going on here? Like that, like, no. Not everybody can just come in here and see what's going on. Like, no, like we're witnessing the birth of a god, essentially. We're witnessing, or a god be a midwife, or one of them, to cast powers onto thee through the oracle onto the child to give them undisputed power. And that's how the Luminari believe it to be. That there is a channel of divine power that comes from clandestine, who is this god. And if you know anything about clandestine, it means secrecy, or just hidden and shrouded in mystery. So you have this god who's super powerful, and he's kind of like, shh, and he's giving power to the oracle, who is channeling that energy, and then is being used as a conduit to output that power onto the new child to make him undisputed emperor or empress, so that this way no one can judge his power. So, and that's important because especially when I talk about the politics and the way that things are with the Luminari, and especially like the river belts and the way that the politics of the river belts work, challenging someone's authority is a big deal. And challenging someone's rite of passage is a big deal. And these are things that, of course, mine is highly specific, but these are things that you want to navigate yourself. These are things that you want to include in your world. You want to be able to make your world as real as possible by using a myriad and a variety of factors. Everything from the way that the land masses are described all the way to the way birth works. You need to explain how this world works. Now, you don't have to explain everything, right? You don't need to explain down to like the grains of wheat. I would do that because I'm that guy. Like I would do it. I remember being in college and talking to my creative writing professor about video game dialogue and branching, and he sat there, took off his glasses, he rubbed his face, and he went, I couldn't imagine being the guy who has to sit there and write out every possible outcome that could happen in a video game. And yet people do it, and they get paid, and they make a lot of money. I couldn't imagine doing it. I would not be able to do it. I would be sitting there going, Jesus, but what if? But that's the beauty of writing a world. You get to do what if, and there's no wrong answer. But of course, if it doesn't make any sense, then you have a problem. But you want it to feel so unique that it works and it makes sense. So be descriptive, be precise. Be precise in those descriptions. Describe exactly what it is in your world, why it's important, why it matters, what the land masses are like, why are they like that, what's surrounding these land masses, how does birth work, who gets to do what, why do certain things do what they do. My last and final example before we wrap up for today is if you wrote a world where it constantly snows and it never stops and everyone dresses like an Inuit or Eskimo and they carry like a hunting rifle and they have these specialized gear and shoes, and everybody has to keep fireplaces on at all times, and maybe there's like people fight over resources out in the snowy wasteland, etc. You need to explain to me tell me about the weapons, tell me about the clothing, tell me where's the clothing come from, what are the animals, where do the animals come from, tell me about the weather, tell me about the textures about the weather, tell me about the environment. You need to do your due diligence and really write down what about your world is so unique, and don't be afraid to really branch out. I mean, I talked about the whole birth thing. I talked about why with the Luminari, like, it's a really big deal. So, do yourself a favor and be descriptive about your world. Be precise about your world. Add in a lot of detail about your world and explain why certain chains of event happen, right? If you're writing this snowy post-apocalyptic world, everyone wears this certain type of fur coat. Well, where does that come from? And talk about where can they be found, right? Treat the audience as if they are in this world and that they are new, or that this world has always existed but you've never been there. And of course, later on within the lecture series, we'll be talking about how the main character should be a foreigner in their own world when it comes to interacting with it. But for now, that's all I have for today. Thank you all so much for watching. It really does mean a lot. If you did enjoy this video, make sure that you hit the thumbs up button and drop a comment below. If you are creative writing, make sure to save this for yourself so you can look back at it at a later time. Or if you know someone who's creative writing, make sure to share it with them as well. I hope you enjoyed this video lecture series, and I will see you all in the next one. Thanks for watching, guys.